I'm Phil.
I'm Mike.
I'm Cindy.
And you're watching Word of Mouth.
My uncle's at the base. He has the detail officers to regiment.
General Raleigh?
Yes. Well, I went to see him on the quiet and asked him if he could get me into this battalion. He bit my head off and said I'd got to be treated like everybody else.
Yes.
And next day I was told I was coming to this battalion. Funny, wasn't it?
Extraordinary coincidence.
And when I got to battalion headquarters and the colonel told me to report to C Company, I could have cheered.
It's a play about the World War I, the British troops that are waiting for the German attack on one of the borders in France.
And there are battles and struggles, you know, both internally, emotionally, dealing with the war, and you know, the courage that it takes.
It's about World War I. I don't think many of the people today, young people, realize what happened, what kind of a war it was. It's different than World War II. It was different than Korea or Vietnam. It was a different time, a different place. But it's more a story of the emotions of the people, the men involved.
It's set in France, in a bunker. Basically, we're underground for the entire show, waiting for this attack by the Germans, and you know, on and off, different characters will go up onto the main ground above the level of the bunker, but we never travel with them there.
Captain Stanhope is the main character in the story. Everything seems to revolve around him. He is the leader and the captain of the battalion. He's a young man. He's he's roughly around 21, early 20s, and been thrust in this position of leadership.
The captain was a man who was troubled. He was going through hell, seeing his men die. He was afraid. Every man was afraid, and a lot of his men were afraid. But he had to overcome this fear to function.
Once we are introduced to Captain Stanhope, we then meet Lieutenant Raleigh, who is someone who happened to know Captain Stanhope during his years in school. He was sort of a freshman while Stanhope was the senior who was the captain of all the sports teams, and Raleigh looked up to him and envied him and basically wanted to be him when he grew up.
That changes the whole dynamic of Captain Stanhope and his position.
And he felt this boy is now coming and he might be responsible for his death. And that's another burden he had to carry.
There were 11 cast members on the stage, and they were all excellent performers.
They looked real for the part. They looked like they were actually there. And that's the greatest compliment I can give. I thought they were the real soldiers there.
Hugh Dancy played the role of Captain Stanhope. It's his Broadway debut, and if you ask me, you wouldn't be able to tell. He was very natural on the stage, and actually I thought he was one of the better actors in the show.
He really portrayed his role perfectly, I think. Excellent for a young officer, which he was. Definitely tormented, you know, had deep feelings and deep emotions.
I found Boyd Gaines to be the best in this play. He was almost in every single scene in the first 2 acts. He was always on stage, always was the calming voice, always was the answer, always helped the young captain get through the problems or questions he was having.
The set itself I thought was excellent for a small stage, and the fight scenes that were staged in there, I kept feeling they were going to end up in our lap.
But the sound effects were terrific. Right after the show, the bombing, and you'd believe you were there.
There was a lot of sound. I think that was the most creative part of the show. The set was really just a bunker, and they didn't want you to be distracted by oncoming, you know, tracks of scenery or this and that. No, there was no special lighting or basically a candlelit room. It was pretty dark the whole time.
It wasn't about the politics of the war. We all agree that war is terrible. Necessary maybe, but it was terrible, and that it's the life of the people who had to do this.
Well, it is political because we're currently embroiled in a war of our own, and it makes us think about what the people who are fighting in that war currently might be feeling.
I was reading that in 1928. It was written and then shelved. It could have been written yesterday. It was very about the time period, of course, but it was very current.
I think this is a great show. I would definitely recommend it for everybody. I don't think there's one particular audience it would be good for, but I also don't think there's one audience it would be bad for.
I will tell my friends about it tomorrow. I don't know who I would recommend it to because it is a heavy drama. It is about war, even though it's more about feelings and emotions, but it's not a real feel-good play.
Two words I would use to describe this story. Yeah. One is powerful, and one is spellbinding. And it's the kind of a story you'd remember.
Then I went on duty in the front line, and a sergeant told me all about Dennis. He said that Dennis is the finest officer in the battalion, and the men simply love him. He hardly ever sleeps in the dugout. He's always up in the front line with the men, cheering them on with jokes and making them keen about things like he did the kids at school. I'm awfully proud to think he's my friend.